All right.
Deja vu, everybody.
We were just live out here a couple days ago.
We were live out here a couple days ago, and then we just recorded and it wasn't working. So now we're back doing this again. So
we recorded for a
rehearsal. It was our rehearsal for this
for Mary Phagan, and yeah, it's just our YouTube thing wasn't working right. Yeah. So we'll give it a minute for people to jump on. This is not our last stop, though. We had said we were going live at our last stop, which
we still will.
We will. We'll still go live at the last stop. But now you get 2 doses of live with Krista and Amy.
We're not wrong, because originally this was supposed to be the last stop. So
yeah,
we're just last stop.
We switch it up.
That's fine.
That's how we roll. Yeah. So we are going to once again do Mary Phagan's grave, since the last one was
and you guys get to see it this time.
Messed up.
This time
actually, you know, I hit the button short anyways on the last one. I messed it up. So it's a whole thing. Someday we'll get our act together and be professional, but until then, it's more entertaining, I think, this way. So we'll give it just another minute, but I'm gonna pan around, and I can't. It's so bright out here, y'all, which is great, and I'm not. Yes. So
this is the top of the hill for sure. In the news section of the cemetery. So this was kind of established in 1902, what was part of Glover's Grove. So you probably can see my car out in the distance. Where my car is kind of the middle road cutting the cemetery into 2 sections. So we're in the newer part, which is mainly, obviously there's 20th century graves here, but there actually are a couple of people who were buried in the old sections, exhumed and moved over. There are a few, so when you're walking around, if you see some 1800s, it's okay.
That's why.
That's why.
Right here, we're next to Saul's, for those that remember Saul's department store on Marietta Square.
Inside the fence is the Gober family. So Sarah Blackwell Gober Temple wrote the book First 100 Years
of Cobb County history.
Cobb County. Yeah, and it published it in the 1930s. So that's kind of Amy and my go-to for research to start with. And then she's actually just across this little pathway from the grave of Mary Phagan.
Here we are. She's got a marker. Tell us a little bit about, very brief, about why she's significant.
Yeah, and that was put in like 1993, somewhere around there.
Okay.
By the city of Marietta.
Okay.
So what we have here are some cousins. You have her mother, Fanny, her sister, Ollie Mae.
Stay close to me, because the wind is blowing. And
sorry about that.
It's not going to be able to hear it.
So it's always blowing in the cemetery.
I know.
So we have Fanny, you have her sister Ollie Mae, and then you have Mary's spot. And then we'll go over to there in just a minute, and you get her paternal grandparents, William Jackson Phagan and Angelina.
Okay. So who do you want to talk about first?
Let's just go over really quick here. So you have her paternal grandparents. These were the grandparents that the family was living with in Alabama when Mary was born. Her grandmother died in 1910. Her, and I know it's very hard to see, but it's April 27th, 1910. I didn't realize that. April 27th.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. 110 years ago today. Yeah. And then her grandfather died November 20th, and it's 1914. So just like a year and a half after Mary's murder. Her maternal grandparents are over in that Sardis cemetery that we talked about, over in East Cobb, kind of off the Paper Mill Road. So let's head back over towards Mary's grave. So I'm going to kind of pick up where we left off at the church, because obviously it's not very far. Drive, walk, whatever.
The church is in this general direction over there. That's that would be Atlanta Street over there, if you can see it. I don't know, over the hill, just over the hill.
We literally came over the railroad tracks and made like one turn.
Yeah.
So finally the crowd in the church thinned out and the casket was brought out. Mrs. Phagan was half carried by her husband on one side and Dr. Linkus, the pastor, on the other. Behind them walked the sorrowing sister, her brother Ben, who was a sailor on the United States ship Franklin. He had arrived the night before. And then her other brothers, Joshua and Charlie. While the hearse and carriages went around the road to the cemetery, a great crowd poured over the railroad tracks to the cemetery. Dr. Lincoln spoke briefly at the grave, the old comforting lines, earth to earth, ashes to ashes, dust to dust. It did not seem to comfort even him, and he broke off his prayer as if he thought that time alone and no words on earth could heal the wounds that had been made in the hearts of the family. When the first shovelful of earth was thrown down into the grave, Mrs. Phagan broke down completely. Half deliriously, she raved of her daughter. Quote, she was taken away when the spring was coming, the spring that was so like her. And oh, she wanted to see the spring. She loved it. It loved her. She played with it. It was a sister to her almost. On she wailed. Her husband tried to quiet her, but he failed. She crept up to the edge of the grave, and taking from the clergyman's hand the handkerchief that he had been using to wipe away her tears, she waved it. Goodbye, Mary, she sobbed. Goodbye. It's too big a hole to put you in, though. It's so big, and you were so little, my own little Mary. So this marker that you're seeing right now is actually the one put up by the family around 5-6 years ago, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And then the actual marker, this portion was put in 1915 by the United Confederate Veterans, and then we noticed in our first go around that it was done by the Cobb County Marble in Marietta. Was that right?
Cobb County? No, I think it's. We just did this.
We just did it.
What does it say?
No, it does say Cobb County Marble Company.
Oh, okay.
Done by.
Oh, okay.
And this was put in 1915, and then this portion here. Watch the cord. We're charging at the same time. This portion here was put in later in the 1930s, but you can see the date is incorrect. It should say June 1st, 1899. So she would have been almost 14. So yeah, stand on that side. Yeah. Almost 14.
You can't really see it, but it says 1900.
The coins represent the tokens given to the ferrymen to help cross the river Styx, which is the river in the underworld. And then we have toys, and I think are those shells, and a Confederate flag tile, and a Bible, and a dog tag with a Bible verse on it.
Yeah. So family or interested parties are still coming and leaving. And then this is, it's not a rosary, so I'm not quite sure what it is, if it's just a necklace or might be some other sort of a prayer bead thing, but I know it's not a rosary.
Definitely not a rosary.
So, whoa, and I'm about to fall over something.
Her mother's footstone?
Yes.
So,
mother.
After her death and when the trial begins, Fanny goes to the trial. The sister, Ollie Mae, goes. Fanny's mother, Anna Benton goes to the funeral, or not the funeral, the trial. And on the second day of the trial, Leo Frank, Anna Benton was so overcome with grief and worry that she was taken to her bed, from which she was never able to rise. She died on August 17th, 1913. And Fanny was quoted as saying, "After my mother became confined to her bed, her one hope and prayer was that she might be spared until the end of the trial. She's with Mary now, though, and I'm sure she must be far happier than if she were still here." And again, she's buried over at Sardis. So what ends up after the trial and to the family, Fanny and John Coleman have a daughter named Billy in 1916, so Mary's half sister, and they kind of live the rest of their life quietly in the Smyrna area. Ollie marries her suitor in early 1914, Horace Thrakill, and then they have a daughter late 1914 named Mary. Mary's a name you'll see a lot with this family. One of the brothers has his first daughter, who is named Mary Frances, passes away at the age of 10 months from measles, the same thing that had killed his father. So this family had one isolated incident of tragedy. It was definitely something that followed them. And then Fanny lived out, when John Coleman died, lived out the rest of her life kind of with her sister, who lived in Marietta, or with Ollie, or with Billy, who lived in Florida. So they kind of made their way.
And she did, you said she did sue the pencil factory?
She did sue the pencil factory for damages and did receive a few $1,000s, which obviously is nothing. So, but yes, if you're wondering where John Coleman is, he's actually buried somewhere else. He had been married before, and he's buried with his first wife. So.
Oh, okay. And one person on one of our prior videos mentioned that we could have stopped in Oakland to visit Lucille Frank's grave, and she is buried out there. That would be Leo Frank's wife, widow, and we just opted not to make that stop. I'm not quite sure where in the cemetery she is.
She's buried between her parents, but we don't know in the Jewish section. But if you've ever been out there, which we have, our friends are not working out there right now, and I couldn't just say, tell me where to go.
Yeah, and the Jewish section is heavily populated,
but it's an unmarked area. Yeah, or her parents are marked, but she is not.
Yeah. So, but she did an interesting thing that I remember that we were talking about is Lucille ended up coming back. She left, I think, and went to Nashville for a little while, and then she came back to Atlanta, and as a single widow, and lived in Atlanta and worked at I think it's Regenstein's is I think where she ended up, one of the department stores. We were discussing whether it was Rich's or not. I don't think it was Rich's though, but we can find out.
Mary's sister definitely did work at Rich's. But,
okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, maybe it was Rich's.
Maybe, I don't know.
Maybe it was. Wouldn't that be interesting if they both worked together? So we'll have to look that up. But yeah, so Oakland is another, and there's a couple other people involved in this story who are buried out there. Some of the lynchers, or at least one that we know of Leo Franks. So we're going to get to that in the next stop. But
one person though that is here and is actually not very far, we're going to walk right up there, is Herbert Clay, Eugene Herbert Clay.
Yes.
Older brother of, as Amy calls him, Lucius Clay. General Lucius Clay. So we're actually, literally.
Tell my secrets.
I know, right?
Nicknames for everybody.
Yes. So
Lucius. Yep. That's quite a story, a whole nother side story. But let's walk up this direction. I'm going to follow you. And you're going to make sure I don't trip over anything.
There's no sign. What's that one? So the Clay monument, this obelisk that I need to get the guys to trim some of the branches off here. This is the tallest obelisk in the cemetery, and it was for Alexander Stevens Clay, the only United States senator born and raised in Cobb County. Okay, we know Johnny Isaacson lives here, but he was not born in Cobb County. So this is actually the back portion of the cemetery, or the plots. We'll swing around the front.
It says Clay, and for those wondering, this is the same. This obelisk is for the same man who's on the statue in the middle of the Marietta Square, Alexander Stevens Clay. He's got a full statue of himself up there, and it goes all the way up.
Yeah, it's a tall one.
Yeah, into the tree. Now, this is not who we're talking about, though. Yeah. Alexander Stevens,
he died in 1910, so he was already gone.
Okay, he was already gone. And Herbert.
Herbert, right here.
Herbert, okay. Herbert Clay is one of his sons, one of Alexander Stevens, the oldest son, mayor of Marietta, Solicitor General of the Blue Ridge Circuit, president of the Georgia Senate.
One who loved his fellow man.
Now, I'm going to turn this around for a second and get in the shade where I can see.
Yeah.
I, in no way, want to turn this into any sort of a bashing session. No. So, this is all, as historians, we look back and we just can look at the facts. We don't really know people, who they are and how they are. But I can say that it's been well documented and published, I should say, that he wasn't perhaps our most upstanding citizen, even though he was high up in politics, which can sometimes be a given. But anyway, so Herbert Clay was one of the Clay boys. They were well known around town. Their father obviously was very well positioned, and
all the Clay children were indulged in their childhood.
That's what it sounds like. They have a beautiful home that's still standing on Atlanta Street, just almost across the street.
Yeah, we can't see it because of the trees, but in the winter you can.
But anyway, so Herbert, his connection to, he's one of the higher powered men who was involved in planning the kidnapping and lynching of Leo Frank. Now, the way this breaks down, and I'm going to again go into a little bit more at the last stop, but the way it breaks down is you've got kind of your very high politically powerful men who kind of plan it, and then they get their henchmen essentially to implement it. And there's a couple layers. There's the drivers, and there's the mechanic, and then there's the, you know, the strong arms guys. You know, like there's a variety of, there's actually like 25, 20
there's
something.
levels to this. Like I said in the one video,
right.
This involves classes and various levels for this.
So the interesting thing about a number of them, including Clay, since we're standing here, Herbert Clay, he was also involved in the Forsyth lynching that I mentioned in one of our last stops at the tower. And so he and some of the other lawyers who are
because the Blue Ridge Circuit encompassed a lot of Northwest and North Georgia. So
So 2 years prior, I think it was 2 years prior, maybe a year or two, maybe it's 1910 when Forsyth happened, around 1910. And then, so he's involved in that lynching, and then fast forward a couple years, and he's involved in the one here. Now, they took Leo to Milledgeville, is where he ended up in the state prison there after he was convicted of being a murderer. And so, again, we'll get into that story in a minute. But so this is, so let me turn this back around to Clay. Herbert Clay also, his life did not end well. He died possibly, I think they said, by a heart attack.
That's what the newspapers said.
The newspapers, we don't know exactly how, but he was in a
kind of seedy hotel.
Seedy
hotel in Atlanta
with a female companion.
Yes.
Actually, no. I think it wasn't a heart. I think he was hit over the head.
Well, yes, but the newspapers. Now I've seen this. The newspapers claim some sort of health crisis, but
I think Steve Oney's book might have said.
Well, and even the son, Herbert Clay Jr. Says, I don't know if that's really true, but
at some point his wife, Frances
is his mother.
His mother, that's his mother. Oh yeah, his wife's probably not over here.
No,
she divorced him.
Well, he had two wives.
Okay, the first wife
is not here.
Is not here.
No.
She divorced him.
Not long after the lynching, like 1916.
Yeah,
it really wasn't that long.
Which, you know, divorces at that time never happened. So, you know, it's got to be serious. But these are a couple other children, I'm guessing.
These are. So this is Frank and Alexander Jr. Are two of Eugene's brother, or Herbert's brothers. Sorry, I call him Eugene, but
okay.
And then Lucius Clay is actually buried in Arlington. There was a daughter; she is not buried here. And then there's more tombstones in the corner, and that is Francis. Alexander Stephen Clay, his wife's parents. So that's his father back there. I think Alexander Stephen Clay's father. But also, so you mentioned Arlington. So another side story that we will delve into at some point, we can do this with videos, is so Herbert, unfortunately, was not the best representation of the Clay boys. However, his youngest brother, Lucius is the youngest.
Lucius, I think there was quite a substantial age difference between them too. Anyways, he ends up going to West Point.
It's about 10 years,
Yeah, about 10 years. Okay. Lucius goes to West Point, and
he didn't do too hot there.
No, he got sent home. But regardless, long story short, he's the father of the Berlin airlift. During World War II, he rises in rank to a general, but he's more of a organizational type guy than a boots on the ground.
Architect of, as they say, architect of the Berlin airlift. So
he organized getting airstrips all over the country, getting the country kind of ready for war, he's the main reason we eventually got Bell Aircraft to Marietta to build the airplanes.
Was our DC connection that we needed.
So, and then later on in the war, he became the sole man. Actually, he was the acting governor of Berlin after we occupied after the war, and then was the father of the Berlin airlift. He also, even later after that, he did the groundwork, I think, for our interstate system. Even though Eisenhower takes the credit for it, President Eisenhower,
he needed Lucius.
Lucius was the one who really did the work. You know, we all know how that goes. Yeah. So, anyways, so the Clay family is quite an interesting history as well. Lucius's son, I think, became a general.
Yes.
And then grandson
is Chuck Clay.
Is Chuck Clay, who is a local
attorney
and lawyer. Yeah. So they're still around. So, anyways, anything else?
No, but stay with us.
Okay, so yes, we are going to go live again at our last stop, which is going to be Frey's Gin, which is where Leo Frank was hung, and we'll find out why they brought him to Marietta to hang him. So
give us 30 minutes.
Sure.
A little bit more.
Depends on technical difficulties.
Well, and also finding the sign, because I haven't been over there since the sign moved. But and also for us to take a shot with the big chicken.
You gonna take a shot?
A picture with it.
Oh, dang! Man, I was like, are you surprising me with a shot?
Not, you're right. I'm driving.
We should make a big chicken shot though. That could be fun.
Well, we have shot glasses at work.
All right, guys. We'll see you soon.